So if you're not on X, formerly known as Twitter, you're probably missing. There's a massive love affair going on between Americans and Japanese people.
If you're an X user, a couple weeks ago, out of nowhere, your entire For You feed was probably packed with Japanese tweets that were auto-translated into English. And it revealed something surprisingly wholesome. Americans and the Japanese really like each other. A lot.
Like, the timeline is just filled with Japanese people talking about American culture, predominantly like red America culture. We're talking like monster trucks, barbecues, pickup trucks, Texas in general, and obviously Japan. Americans have always had a thing for Japan, so that's, the weeb thing's always been there.
Yes, there is a whole subculture in our country dedicated to the southern United States, especially Texas. I'm glad people abroad can appreciate it too.
And after seeing this massive wave of love between America and Japan, something finally clicked for me. For years, the internet has been running this quiet little campaign. If an American actually liked Japan too much, it was weird. A few people get a little too obsessed with anime, and all of a sudden, Americans liking Japanese culture is cringe. One guy takes a katana on the subway, and all of a sudden, we're supposed to think that studying the blade is uncool.
This is about what you saw on the train. It's folded, tempered, and it does its job.
But the truth is, all that shaming was just a psyop trying to cover up the fact that the United States and Japan are not only the greatest allies, but we're also best friends. And today, we're gonna explore that. Now, to truly understand how powerful this friendship actually is, you have to go back to a time when the United States and Japan weren't friends at all. The Pacific War wasn't just another front in World War II. It was ruthless, even by World War II standards. It was deeply personal and fueled by hatred on both sides. Both nations had raced through their own industrial revolutions at almost the same moment in history. America after the Civil War, Japan during the Meiji Restoration, turning themselves into the industrial giants of their hemispheres. The United States became an arsenal for democracy. Japan became Asia's first modern empire, churning out battleships, aircraft, and munitions at a pace that stunned the world. They weren't just fighting each other, they were two mirror-image superpowers colliding. Imperial Japan fielded soldiers with a level of discipline and willingness to die that stunned even the most hardened Allied veterans. Drawing on a modernized Bushido code, they were taught that surrender meant shame, and that the highest honor was to fall in battle for the emperor. This produced some of the most determined resistance of the entire war, and arguably some of the most fanatically disciplined warriors in modern history. By the end of it, Japan was devastated. Cities flattened, millions dead, and people preparing to defend the mainland with whatever they had left. The final response was the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, the only time nuclear weapons have ever been used in combat in all of history. The world had never seen destruction like that. But instead of staying enemies, something else happened. In the years that followed, Japan rebuilt very fast. With support from the United States, the country transformed itself in just a couple decades. Cities rose back up, industry came roaring back, and the entire economy was redefined.
But both the Japanese citizens and the American soldiers put their hearts into it. And it is out of their association that the friendship between the two countries derives much of its strength.
And as Japan rebuilt physically, something else started to take shape too. A new relationship between two countries learning how to move forward together. Still, it was strategic.
If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist.
Japan lies perilously close to both Russia and communist China, and the American troops in Japan are closer than any other forces to the Iron Curtain which hides Soviet ambition.
As the world split in two during the Cold War, Japan suddenly became one of the most important countries on the planet. A democratic, industrial power sitting right on the edge of communist influence. China, the Soviet Union, and the Korean Peninsula. For the United States, Japan was an anchor, a place to project power, maintain stability, and keep a foothold in Asia. And for Japan, the relationship made just as much sense. Instead of rebuilding a massive military, it could rely on American protection. That security umbrella gave Japan something incredibly rare in that moment: the ability to focus almost entirely on economic growth. Even today, the relationship is still defined by that same alignment, working together to maintain stability in the region, counter adversarial powers, and navigate an increasingly tense global landscape. But somewhere along the way, the two countries became more than just great strategic allies and became best friends.
Nice to meet you, John. Mr. Ian Roberts. Nice to meet you. Peter Tencio. All right. Nice to meet you. Jerome Smith. Come on, bro. What's up, fam? You know this. Keith Williamson. Nice to meet you. Good to meet you. All right. Here we go. Right this way, sir.
And that's through a constant mutual love and respect for the other's culture. American baseball became one of the most popular sports in Japan. On the flip side, karate dojos began popping up all over the US in the 70s and 80s. All of a sudden, American kids wanted to be ninjas, and Japanese kids wanted to be baseball players. Japanese cars like Toyota and Honda started taking over American roads. Electronics followed. Sony, Panasonic, high-quality products that people trust. Made in Japan stopped meaning cheap and began meaning better. American rock and roll, jazz, and pop music began filling clubs in Tokyo, and American movies, fashion, and food would find their place too. Sorry about the McDonald's, by the way. Then in the 80s and 90s, Japanese entertainment arrives in America and starts taking over childhoods.
The Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
Nintendo and Sega resurrected the video game industry, which had completely crashed by that point. And then Americans discover anime. Shows like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon hit American TV, and they feel different right away. The stakes are higher, the storytelling is more mature. Akira, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Yu Yu Hakusho, eventually Pokemon. It was animation unlike anything Americans had seen. And at the same time, Western animation and movies were being embraced in Japan. Hollywood movies like Jurassic Park and Western animation like Disney were massively popular. Tokyo Disneyland was opened in 1983. When disaster struck Japan in 2011 with the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, the United States launched one of its largest humanitarian missions ever, Operation Tomodachi, which translates to Operation Friendship, sending thousands of troops, ships, and aircraft to assist with relief and recovery. What makes this relationship even more unique is how it looks forward, not backwards. Despite the brutality of World War II and the atomic bombings, Japan has always largely embraced a mindset of rebuilding, cooperation, and peace, focusing less on blame and more on what comes next. And that difference matters a lot more than people realize. Because unlike many other historical conflicts or events, Japan never built its modern relationship with the United States around guilt. There was no sustained effort to extract apologies from everyday Americans, no cultural messaging telling younger generations that they owed something for decisions made in 1945. In a time when so many Americans are fatigued by national or racial guilt and endless calls for collective apologies for slavery, racism, and every other historical sin, it's worth noting that younger people are actually looking far more negatively at the atomic bombings of Japan than ever before. Not because we were told to. In fact, it's one of the only dark parts of our history that isn't weaponized to make people feel guilty here, but because it's simply a horrible tragedy that impacted a country and culture that we love. And it reminds us that it wasn't really that long ago that we were fighting one of the most brutal wars against arguably our best friend presently on the world stage. At its core, America and Japan are two guys who got into a brutal fistfight, beat the hell out of each other, then dusted themselves off, shook hands, and became best friends.
Still hate you.
Still hate you. Such power. It's raw power.
And maybe the reason they get along so well is because they share the same myth. America gave the world the cowboy, Japan gave the world the samurai, and they're basically the same guy. The cowboy isn't just some guy on a horse. He's America's mythological hero. A lone rider on the frontier, living by his own code, answering to nobody but himself. He's stoic, capable, dangerous when he has to be, and what made him powerful in the American imagination was what he represented. Freedom, self-reliance, personal justice, a man who doesn't want to wait around for the system to fix things. Japan built its myth around a different figure, but the soul of it is almost identical: the samurai. A warrior defined not just by skill, but by the code he lives under: discipline, loyalty, honor, courage. The samurai isn't just feared because he can fight, he's respected because he governs himself. His weapon is supposed to reflect his character. His conduct matters as much as his strength. And then there's the Ronin, the masterless samurai, the wandering warrior with no lord, no fixed place in society, and no one left to answer to except his own code, which is basically just Japan's version of the lone gunslinger. They're two versions of the same archetype: the man on the edge of civilization, the outsider who somehow ends up protecting it, the warrior who lives by a personal code and carries a weapon that means more than violence. It means discipline. It's who he is. The six-shooter, the katana, same idea. And both countries became obsessed with these figures at the exact moment they were disappearing. That's what gives both myths their power. America turns the cowboy into a legend right as the frontier is closing and industrial life is taking over. Japan turns the samurai into a legend right after the samurai class is abolished and modernity starts swallowing the old order. So in both countries, the myth is really about loss. It's about a golden age that already feels gone. The cowboy becomes the symbol of a freer, harder, more honest America that people worry has vanished. The samurai becomes the symbol of a more honorable, disciplined Japan that modern life can never fully recreate. And yet the same spirit didn't die, it simply put on a new face. Both nations rocketed into the modern world at almost the same moment, tearing through industrialization in the late 1800s and never looking back. America after the Civil War, Japan after the Meiji Restoration, two countries that decided they would not be left behind. They became industrial titans, economic superpowers, cultural exporters, and leaders on the world stage. What holds them together now is the same code their myths were built on: unapologetic American and Japanese national pride. A deep, quiet conviction that their own culture, their own traditions, and their own way of life come first, and that protecting that is not just right, it's what makes both nations stronger. Both America and Japan carry a kind of raw, unapologetic exceptionalism, and they respect it in each other. When you look at a lot of these translated posts, it's a core theme directed both ways. Both countries know the other is a top dog, culturally, technologically, in sheer drive and resilience. And it's not the condescending, performative praise you hear from people trying hard to sound enlightened, talking about how much they respect other cultures, the kind that reeks of some condescending pity. It's genuine. Real recognizes real. But it's more wholesome than a simple strategic alliance. It's a deep friendship. Two lone riders who ended up riding side by side. And once I started putting this video together, I started thinking about this mythos quite a bit. And there was one show in particular that I think is maybe the perfect example of the two coming together. Now, to be totally honest, I'm really not much of an anime fan. That said, I've been really burnt out on Western TV shows and movies, so I've been meaning to dive into some again as an adult. I just have no idea which series to start with, so shoot me your recommendations. But there were a few anime series I was obsessed with when I was a kid, and my favorite was Cowboy Bebop. And there's gonna be some spoilers here. Cowboy Bebop is what happens when Japanese creators fall in love with American style without losing what makes them Japanese. It feels like a space western, a noir detective story, and a martial arts movie. On the surface, the show is drenched in American influence. The title says cowboy, the characters are bounty hunters, the whole thing plays like the Wild West was dragged into space. Spike Spiegel, the main character, isn't literally a cowboy, he's a cowboy in essence. A drifter, an outlaw, a guy living on the edge of society, following his own code, moving through a lawless frontier, and doing just enough good to keep his conscience intact. The soundtrack is built on American jazz and blues, and the music isn't just background, it's the whole pulse of the show. And visually, it's pulling from all over American and Western cinema. It feels rooted in rugged American individualism, but it's still completely Japanese melancholy. In Japanese culture, a cherry blossom is considered most beautiful not just for its color, but because it will fall in a few days. The bittersweet sadness that comes from realizing everything is fleeting. Spike is caught in the middle. He has the Western dread of a man who feels his life is a fake dream because he can't find meaning in his freedom. But he meets his end with Japanese melancholy, finally accepting the inevitable fading of his own star. That part of Cowboy Bebop comes straight out of Japan in the 1990s. The show was made during Japan's lost decade, after the collapse of the bubble economy, when the country was dealing with stagnation, disillusionment, and a kind of spiritual drift. That mood is everywhere in the show. Spike, Jet, and Faye don't feel like triumphant heroes, they feel like people living in the aftermath of something. Underneath the guns and jazz, Cowboy Bebop is obsessed with impermanence, emptiness, and the danger of attachment. It keeps circling the same question: what happens when a person cannot let go of the past? That's a deeply Japanese and Buddhist way of looking at suffering. Spike doesn't just have a tragic backstory, he's practically a man being destroyed by attachment. And its sci-fi setting, this messy, multicultural solar system, feels like a Japanese creator imagining this Japanese and American futuristic frontier, where the cowboy and the samurai have already blurred into one drifting, rootless soul. The result is something that feels perfectly American and perfectly Japanese at the same time. And when you really zoom out, two countries that once tried to annihilate each other in the most brutal way possible ended up as best friends. Baseball, cars, anime, video games, cowboys, samurai, barbecue. They've been swapping the coolest parts of each other ever since. So if you're an American, be sure to remember, always strive to be the type of American that the Japanese want you to be.
Because I'm the president of the great United States of America!
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, I think you might also like this video here, so be sure to check it out.